Picture a table, a proper table, the kind you're used to. Now imagine it empty. Not empty because you forgot to shop. Empty because there is nothing, and there hasn't been nothing for 3 days, and the children are asking and you have no answer. Now put that table in 1855. Put it in the East End of London, where 30,000 people are packed into streets that weren't built for 3,000, where the air smells like the river, and the river smells like everything that comes out of human bodies, where the fog is so thick some mornings you could cut it with the bread knife you used to divide one loaf between 5 mouths. That's where we're going tonight. Not into the grand houses, not into the kitchens of the wealthy, where cooks have budgets and ice boxes and the luxury of choosing what to make for dinner. We're going into the other kitchens, the ones with one pot and one shelf, and one prayer that the money lasts until Friday. We're going into the world before supermarkets, before sell-by dates, before the refrigerator, before the plastic-wrapped chicken breast and the loaf that stays soft for a week, before the idea that food just appears when you need it. I make these history stories, and look, I genuinely don't know if this helps you sleep or just makes you grateful you don't live in 1855. Maybe both. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. Pull up your covers. You're about to wake up much earlier than you'd like. The clock doesn't exist in your house. Not a clock you own anyway. What wakes you is the church bell from St. Anne's, 2 streets over, ringing 4:30 in the morning. And because you've trained yourself to wake at this sound, trained yourself the way you'd train a dog, not gently, your eyes open before the bell has finished ringing. The room is dark, not dim, dark. The kind of dark that has weight to it. The fire went out sometime in the night because you didn't have enough coal to keep it properly going, and now the air in the room has that cold that isn't just cold, it's damp cold, the kind that settles in your chest and stays there all morning. Your breath comes out in small clouds you can't quite see. The smell hits you before anything else, because it always does, it always will. Coal smoke from the building across the alley, filtering through the gap under the window where the putty cracked last winter and never got properly fixed. The chamber pot in the corner that needs emptying before the day starts. Underneath that, something harder to name. The accumulated smell of too many people living in too small a space. Grease and sweat, and the particular sweetness of damp wool drying near a fire that isn't warm enough. And from somewhere below you, from the family on the ground floor, the Kellys, with their 6 children and their habit of keeping a pig in the yard, the smell of animals in an enclosed space. That pig smell has been there since September. It's November now. You lie still for exactly 3 seconds, which is all you allow yourself. 3 seconds of warm blanket and closed eyes, and the pretense that you could stay here. Then you're up. The floor is cold enough to pull a hiss through your teeth. Your feet find your boots by memory. You put them in the same spot every night beside the bed, just slightly in from the wall where the floorboard warps. If you step on the warped board in the dark, it makes a sound that could wake the children. You can't wake the children yet. Not at 4:30. They need sleep. Everyone needs sleep. But the market doesn't wait for rest. Your husband Thomas is still breathing in the steady rhythm of deep sleep. He works long shifts at the glassworks, 12 hours on a good day, sometimes 15, and his hands, when you can see them in daylight, are mapped with small burns from flying sparks. He needs his sleep more than you do. That's what you tell yourself. You've told yourself that for 7 years. Some days you believe it. You don't light a candle. Candles cost money. You dress in the dark. Your work dress is on the hook where you left it. You've kept track of that hook since the day you moved in 3 years ago. The fabric is thick and dark, which means it doesn't show filth. which is important because you won't have time to change before the children wake and the day properly begins. Your shawl, your apron, the market bag that used to be a flour sack before flour sacks became market bags because there was nothing else. Your purse, you check it in the dark, 3 shillings and 4pence. That's everything. That's what stands between your family and the nothing in the pot situation you've been carefully avoiding since Tuesday. Thomas gets paid on Friday and it's Wednesday morning, and 3 shillings and 4pence has to buy food for today and tomorrow, and possibly Thursday if Friday's pay comes late, as it sometimes does when the foreman is in one of his moods. 3 shillings and 4pence, 5 people, 2 days. You close your fist around it and go downstairs. The streets at 4:30 in the morning in 1855 London are not empty. That's the thing people get wrong. They imagine the city asleep. They imagine cobblestones gleaming in moonlight, the city taking a long breath before the day begins. What you walk into is already moving. The market carts started coming in from the countryside 2 hours ago. The wholesale dealers have been at Covent Garden since 3. The fish has been coming up from Billingsgate since before the tide turned. The bakers started their fires yesterday afternoon and haven't stopped since. The people who keep London fed don't sleep when London sleeps. The alley you live on connects to Borough High Street, and Borough High Street at 4:30 is already a river of noise and smell. A cart loaded with cabbages comes past you so close that the wheel sends a spray of muddy water up your leg. The driver doesn't look back. There's no time to look back. He has a schedule to keep, and so do you. The cold is worse on the street than it was in the room. Your breath billows out in a great cloud, and you pull your shawl tighter and keep walking. The coal smoke is thicker down here, settling at street level in the still air, and beneath it is the mud. Autumn mud, London mud, which is its own category of thing, made from horse dung and clay and river silt and everything that runs downhill and collects in the low points of the city. You don't think about what you're walking through. You've stopped thinking about that. Your destination is not Covent Garden. Covent Garden is a long walk and costs more, generally, because the dealers there know they're selling to shopkeepers who'll add their own profit on top. What you want is the street market on Union Street, which starts setting up around 5 and where the prices are better for someone buying small quantities, where the stall holders are people like you, women running households on wages that don't quite stretch. But first the bread. The baker is the first stop, always the baker. There are rules about buying bread that nobody teaches you and everybody knows. The first rule, go early. The loaves that come out of the oven between 4 and 6 in the morning are the best ones. Proper weight, properly baked, still carrying enough warmth that when you carry them home under your arm you can feel it through your shawl. By 8 the early loaves are sold, and what's left is yesterday's end-of-day bread, marked down, slightly stale, denser than it should be. The second rule, feel the weight before you hand over your coin. This is not optional, this is survival. Because the bakers of London in 1855 are engaged in a practice so widespread, so normalised, that most people don't even call it cheating anymore. They call it trade. A standard quartern loaf, 4 pounds of bread, is supposed to weigh exactly 4 pounds. In theory. In law, technically, there are supposed to be regulations about this. In practice, there is alum. Alum is a chemical compound, aluminum potassium sulfate, if you want the proper name, and the reason bakers put it in bread is not because it makes the bread taste good. It doesn't make the bread taste good. The reason is that alum makes low-quality flour look and behave like high-quality flour. It whitens the crumb. It creates that tight, even texture that people associate with good bread. It lets a baker use cheap imports, gritty stuff, flour that might have a little chalk dust added to it for extra whiteness, and produce a loaf that looks perfect. You can't taste it mostly. You can't see it. But you can feel it. A loaf with excessive alum has a particular texture, slightly chalky when you break it, a crumb that's too regular, too white, and it doesn't fill you up properly. Not really. Alum binds up in your gut and doesn't let the nutrients through. Children who eat heavy alum bread every day grow up thin and sallow, their mothers frantic, not understanding why the bread they're buying doesn't seem to be doing anything, so you squeeze every loaf before you buy it. The baker on Stony Street is a man named Hargreaves, red-faced and impatient, with arms like the sides of beef he buys from the butcher down the road. He knows you. He knows you squeeze every loaf. He doesn't like it. Morning, you say? Morning? He says it like it costs him something. Quartern loaf. You reach past him toward the shelf. He has maybe 12 loaves out, and pick one up. Feel the bottom. Press the side. Hargreaves watches you with the expression of a man who's been accused of something he considers unreasonable. The loaf feels right. Heavy enough. Not too regular in the crumb where you can see the cut end. This one. 4p halfpenny. You know perfectly well that the legal standard price for a quartern loaf, set by the assize of bread, is fluctuating because grain prices have been doing strange things since the Corn Laws came off. But 4p halfpenny is toward the high end of what you expect to pay. You look at him. Same as last week, he says. Last week the flour was dearer. Prices came down. My flour prices don't come down because some clerk in Westminster says they should. This is probably true. You stare at him for a moment. He stares back. The shop is cold and smells of yeast and something slightly wrong that you've never been able to identify precisely. 4p. 4p halfpenny. You put the loaf back on the shelf. Take the next one, squeeze it. Put it down, take the third one. Stop that. I'll stop when you price fair. This is not defiance for the sake of it. This is not pride. This is arithmetic. The halfpenny you're arguing over is the difference between Tuesday's dinner having something in it and not. Hargreaves makes a sound low in his throat. 4p 3 farthings. You don't say anything. You're looking at the fourth loaf. Fine. 4p. You're robbing me. You hand him the coin. You take the loaf you want. The third one, which felt best. Tuck it under your arm and leave without saying thank you. Thank you implies a favour. This wasn't a favour. This was commerce. The two of you will have approximately this same conversation twice a week for the foreseeable future. Outside, the cold hits you again and you keep walking. The loaf is warm against your ribs. The street market on Union Street starts with sound before it starts with sight. You hear it a full minute before you turn the corner, the layered noise of dozens of people in a small space, setting up, calling to each other, arguing, laughing, moving heavy things across cobblestones. Then the smells arrive. Root vegetables, the particular cold cellar smell of potatoes and turnips and cabbages that have been sitting in someone's barn for days or weeks. And underneath that, the animal smell that follows every London street market, because half the sellers arrived by cart pulled by a horse, and horses do not use the chamber pot. And then you're in it. The market fills the street itself. Stalls run down both sides, boards laid across trestles covered with vegetables and fruit, and some meat and some fish. The light comes from lanterns hung on the stall poles, casting yellow circles of light in the not quite dawn. The sellers are mostly women, older mostly, with the look of people who've been up since 2 and will still be here at noon. They wear heavy shawls and fingerless gloves and keep their money in purses tucked deep inside their clothing, where it can't be reached without a fight. First observation: everything is more expensive at the front where you enter. This is always the way. The best-looking produce is up front, clean and arranged nicely, priced optimally. Walk further in, toward the back, where the light from the lanterns doesn't quite reach, and you find the same vegetables that are 3 days older, a little softer, a little more willing to be negotiated down. Some people won't go to the back of the market. They think it means accepting second best. You know better. Carrots, lovely carrots. A woman, large, wearing an apron over her coat, holding up a bunch of carrots by the greenery. They are, in fact, lovely carrots. They're also a penny for 4, which is not the price you're going to pay. You walk past. She watches you go with professional eyes, assessing whether you're worth calling after. You're not. She can read you the way you read a loaf of bread. Further in. The potato seller is a young man, probably someone's son, sitting on an upturned bucket with his hands in his pockets against the cold. His potatoes are in a pile on a board, mixed sizes, some of them showing the slight softness at the skin that means they're a day or 2 from going bad. Not bad yet. Close enough that he'll take a lower price. How much for a stone? He looks at you, looks at the potatoes, looks at you again. 6pence. A stone of potatoes is £14. 6pence is high. 5 pence. He shakes his head, but slowly, which means he's thinking about it. I can see 3 that are going soft, you say. You point at them without touching. You don't need to touch them. Take those 3 out and we'll say 5 pence for what's left, which is closer to £13, or keep them in and do 5 pence halfpenny for the stone and I'll take my chances. He pulls out the 3 soft ones and sets them aside. 5 pence halfpenny for the stone. Soft ones included. I'll give you a bit extra weight. This is the deal you wanted. You were going to pay 5 pence halfpenny regardless. The point was to establish that you know what you're looking at, and sellers who know you're paying attention will be more careful with what they put in your bag. You count out the coins. He has a pan scale on the corner of the board and weighs your stone with the confidence of someone who's done this 1,000 times, and move the potatoes into your market bag. The bag is already heavier. You've got the bread. Now potatoes. The weight settles on your shoulder. A turnip. A cabbage. You work your way through the market methodically, and every purchase is its own small negotiation, not always in words, sometimes just in the length of your gaze, or the way you put something down and reach for another one. By the time you reach the far end of the market, you've spent 1 and 10 pence, and your bag weighs enough that you have to keep shifting it from shoulder to shoulder. You have 1 and 6pence left. There's no meat in the bag yet. Here's the thing about meat that gets lost when people talk about Victorian food. Everyone knows the wealthy ate meat. The history books are full of it. The Sunday joint, the roast beef of old England, the elaborate dinner parties with their 7 courses. What gets less attention is what the working poor ate, which was mostly not meat. Mostly not anything you'd recognise as a protein by modern thinking. A labourer in 1855 London, his wife and their children might see actual muscle meat, the kind you'd call a proper cut, once a week, on Sundays. The Sunday joint is not a romantic tradition, it's an arithmetical one. You buy the cheapest cut you can find. You stretch it as far as it will go across the Sunday dinner, and then the carcass becomes the rest of the week. Monday, the bones go into the pot with the leftover vegetables and make broth. Tuesday, the broth goes on bread. Wednesday, if there's nothing left, you make do. Thursday, Friday, those are the creative days. The days when you look at what's in the larder and construct something from approximately nothing. The other thing that gets left out, the hierarchy of eating. Thomas eats first. Not because you've decided this exactly. It's not a decision you ever consciously made. But he does physical labour for 12 hours a day, which means his body needs more fuel, which means he gets the larger portion. He needs his strength. He knows this. You know this. He's never said it is a rule. But he always sits down first, and the plate you put in front of him is always the one with the most. The children eat second. You eat whatever's left. Most nights there's enough. Some nights there isn't. You've gotten very efficient at eating small amounts with the expression of someone who is entirely satisfied. The butcher's stall on Union Street is run by a woman named Agnes, which is unusual enough that most people in the neighbourhood know her by name even if they don't buy from her. Agnes inherited the stall from her husband, who died of the same fever that took about 40 families off their feet in the summer 2 years ago. And she runs it with the quiet competence of someone who's been watching a business operate since she was a child and simply hasn't stopped. She has the good cuts up front, some neck chops, a small piece of brisket, what looks like a couple of lamb kidneys. The prices on these are chalked on a board. They're not your prices. They're not even close to your prices. What you're looking at is the back of the stall where things are wrapped in paper and stacked without ceremony. Offal, trotters, a pig's head cut in half, sheep's liver so dark it's almost black. The things that the cookbooks don't mention. The things that have been feeding working-class London for centuries without anyone writing a word about it. Liver, you say? £0.5? Penny 3 farthings. You look at it. The liver is fresh enough, dark, glistening, not dried at the edges. £0.5, and the trotters. How much for a pair of trotters? Penny for the pair. 2 3 farthings for liver and trotters. That leaves you 1 and 4. You need to keep something back for tomorrow. I'll take 1 trotter, you say, and the £0.5 of liver. Agnes wraps them in paper without comment. She's not going to waste energy judging your choices. She's made similar choices herself. She knows exactly what you're doing with 1 trotter and £0.5 of liver and a stone of potatoes. You're making food that will stretch across 5 plates for 2 days if you're careful about portions and add enough onion. The trotter will go in the pot tonight with the potatoes and the turnip, and the fat that renders out of it will serve as the cooking fat for tomorrow's liver. The liver will fry up in 3 minutes and feed the children. Thomas gets the largest piece. You get the smallest, or a piece of bread instead, depending on how far the liver goes. You hand over the coins, tuck the paper packages into the bottom of the bag under the vegetables, and shift the weight to your other shoulder. It's 5:20. The children will be up by 6. The walk back should take 12 minutes. You take 14 because the bag is heavy, and because on the way home you pass a milk seller, a young boy of maybe 15 leading a donkey with 2 large cans hanging from a yoke across his shoulders. The donkey's shoulders, not the boy's. And something makes you stop. Milk. You have children. Children need milk. Or they should have milk. They don't always get it. Milk in London in 1855 is a complicated substance. The pastoral idea of milk, the cow in the green field, the clean pail, the fresh product, bears no relationship to what actually arrives in the city. London's milk mostly comes from dairy cows kept in sheds in the city itself. Sheds with low ceilings and no windows, and enough animals packed in that they generate their own warmth, which the operators consider a feature rather than a problem because it means lower heating costs. These cows are fed on brewers' grains, the wet leftover mash from the brewing industry, which is cheap and filling but not exactly a cow's natural diet. The milk they produce is thin, watery. A normal healthy cow on proper pasture produces rich milk with a cream line that rises quickly when you leave it to stand. London dairy milk sits flat. No cream line, no richness. The sellers know this. Their solution is to add water. Enough water to make the volume larger, which means more money per cow per day. Sometimes the water comes from a pump, sometimes from the river, sometimes from sources you don't want to think about in the context of something your children are going to drink. And that's before you get to the problem of what else gets added. Chalk, starch, treacle in the winter when the quality drops even further. You've known about this for years. Everyone in the neighbourhood has known. In the vague way you know things that you can't do anything about. 2 months ago, a man named Arthur Hill Hassall published a report in The Lancet, which you haven't read because you don't read The Lancet, but you've heard about it through the kind of alley gossip that carries real information if you listen for it, saying that the milk in London is almost universally adulterated and that children are being made ill by it. You stand there looking at the milk boys' cans. How much? Halfpenny a pint, missus. A pint of something. What percentage is milk and what percentage is other things you can't know. But your youngest, little Ellen, is 3, and you've noticed that she's been thin in a way that worries you. Not sick exactly, just thin and pale in a way that isn't the normal winter pallor. You hand over the halfpenny, you take a pint, you tell yourself it's probably fine. Walking home, the pint of milk bumping gently in the jar you're holding, you tell yourself this firmly, the same way you tell yourself a lot of things firmly, because the alternative is standing in the street and crying, which doesn't put dinner on the table. Home is a single room. Properly it's 1 room plus the use of the kitchen in the basement, which you share with the 3 other families in the house, and the use of the yard. 4 families. 1 kitchen, 1 fireplace in the kitchen big enough to actually cook on. The upstairs fireplace, the one in your room, is small, barely functional. Good for taking the edge off the cold, but not for cooking anything that needs sustained heat. This is fine. You've built a system around it. You get the fire going in the kitchen at 6:15 when you get back from market, while Thomas is getting up and the children are starting to stir. The fire takes quickly because you laid it yesterday. Coal dust packed around a good piece of coal, with the kindling arranged just so, and by 6:30 it's hot enough to put the pot on. The pot. Singular. You have 1 cooking pot, an iron thing with a handle and a lid that doesn't fit quite right because the lid is from a different pot that cracked 2 winters ago. You have a pan, a small flat iron pan for frying things. You have a kettle. You have a gridiron for the fireplace, though you rarely use it because the gridiron presupposes having something worth griddling, which presupposes a food budget that doesn't currently exist. Most of the world's food has been cooked in a single pot over a single fire throughout all of history. People don't talk about that very much. They talk about recipes, about ingredients, about dishes. They don't talk much about the single pot. But that's where food happens. The single pot into which everything goes in the right order with the right timing to produce something that's more than the sum of what you put in. Tonight the pot will have the trotter, the potatoes, the turnip, the cabbage, 1 onion, a pinch of salt that you use carefully because salt costs money and water. That's tonight's dinner. It will feed 5 people, and the broth will serve as tomorrow's midday meal. This is not a recipe. This is survival mathematics. You're not alone in this kitchen this morning. You never are. Mrs. Kelly from the ground floor is already here when you arrive, boiling something in her own pot that smells of onions and old fat. She has 6 children, and her husband works on the docks when there's work, which isn't always. She's a tall woman, broad through the shoulders, who carries herself with the certainty of someone who's made it through worse. You've watched her divide a single potato into 6 pieces with the focused precision of a surgeon. "Market," she says. "Potatoes, turnip, cabbage, liver and a trotter. Good price on the liver? Fair enough." She makes a sound of acknowledgement. You both understand that you're not going to share your exact prices. Not because you don't trust each other, but because knowing exactly how little someone paid for the liver they're going to feed their children is an intimacy that falls in a strange category, close enough to make you both uncomfortable. "Milk Boy was on Stony Street," you offer instead. "Halfpenny, halfpenny." She clicks her tongue. "He was 2 farthings last week." Prices go up. "Everything goes up," she says. "Nothing else does." This is so true it doesn't need a response. You get your pot on the hook above the fire and start laying in the trotter and the potatoes. The fire is well established now, putting out a heat that's almost cheerful, and the kitchen, despite everything, despite the cold wall against the yard where the plaster is coming off in sheets, despite the window that's been broken and replaced with oilcloth, is the warmest room in the house. The warmth costs coal costs money. Everything feeds into everything else. By 7, Thomas is dressed and eating a bowl of porridge at the table with the children. You manage to keep a small quantity of oats because oats are cheap and fill a man for longer than bread alone. And the children are in various stages of waking up. Your eldest, Will, is 9, and already has the slightly too old look of a child who's absorbed more information about the world than is good for him. He sits quietly next to his father and eats his porridge in the methodical way he does everything. Your middle one, James, is 6, and is currently having a disagreement with his boot about which of them is more important, a disagreement the boot appears to be winning. Little Ellen, 3 years old, is sitting on the end of the bench closest to the fire with her hands wrapped around her own small bowl, and you watch her drink the porridge in that serious way she has, the way that's always seemed too focused for a 3-year-old. You've been watching her closely lately. She's been coughing at night. Not badly, but there. You put your hand on her forehead when you pass. Not hot yet. Thomas leaves at 7:30. He squeezes your hand as he goes. He's not a demonstrative man, never has been, but the hand squeeze is his. It means something. You squeeze back and then he's out the door and the room gets quieter and you can think again. The morning has its own architecture that you've built over 3 years of living here. Will goes to school at 8. There's a ragged school 3 streets away, free, where a harassed man named Mr. Potts teaches 30 children in a room built for 15, and does it with the determination that you find when you think about it quietly heroic. James is too young for school still. He stays with you. Ellen stays with you. Your morning looks like this. Sweep the floor. Empty the chamber pots into the privy in the yard. Wash up the breakfast bowls in cold water because heating water for washing is an extravagance. Check on the pot in the kitchen. Add the turnip when it's been going an hour. Take James and Ellen to the standpipe on the street corner to fill the water pail, which needs doing every morning because you don't have the luxury of the indoor water that some streets closer to the centre have started to get. The standpipe is always a queue. This morning the queue is 7 people long, which is moderate. In summer the queue can be 20 people, and the water pressure so low that each fill takes 3 minutes. Today it's cold enough that the pipe runs fast and clear, which is a mercy, and you fill your pail in a minute and a half, while Ellen holds James's hand with a grip that suggests she's decided he's hers to manage. She's 3 years old, and she's decided this 6-year-old is her responsibility. You carry the pail home, 15 pounds of water hanging from your right arm, with James chattering beside you and Ellen walking seriously, and pour it into the pitcher in the room, and the kettle for tea, and the reserve pot you keep covered in the corner. By 9 o'clock you've been up for 5 hours and haven't stopped. This is normal. This is just morning. The thing about feeding a family before supermarkets is that it isn't one problem. It's 3 problems stacked on top of each other. The first problem is money. You have a limited amount of it, and food costs more than the limited amount you have, at least in the version of food that's labelled as food and sold honestly. The negotiations you did this morning, the halfpenny on the bread, the soft potatoes, the decision between 1 trotter and 2, those are all arithmetic. Brutal, precise arithmetic done in your head while standing in a cold street at 5 in the morning. The second problem is quality, because the food available to people with your money is not reliable food. The bread may be adulterated, the milk almost certainly is. The meat you can afford is the meat closest to the edge of acceptable. Liver the day it was delivered, trotters that have been sitting since yesterday. You're buying at the low end, and the low end is where the risk is. The third problem is knowledge, because knowing that your bread has alum in it, knowing that your milk has been watered, knowing that the pie from the street seller has God knows what in it, knowing these things doesn't give you alternatives. It doesn't give you money for better bread or cleaner milk. It just gives you anxiety layered on top of the arithmetic. Some women don't know. You've met them. Good women, hard-working women, who simply buy what's available and don't look too closely and hope for the best. You can't decide if they're lucky or not. Knowing and not being able to change anything is its own particular weight. But you know, you've always known. Your mother showed you how to test bread when you were 7 years old, standing in a different kitchen in a different city, watching her press her thumb into a loaf while the baker looked on with the same expression Hargreaves has now. Some knowledge is passed down like silver. Some of it is passed down like this, like how to spot bad food in a market at 5:30 in the morning, how to stretch a trotter across 2 days, how to feed 5 people on money that should only feed 2. It's not in any book, but it gets passed on. Midday brings a problem you didn't plan for. Will comes home from school at noon. The ragged school does a half day on Wednesdays, something to do with the schedule of the volunteer who helps Mr. Potts with arithmetic, and you're never quite sure when it's going to be a full day or a half day. And he comes in through the door with a particular expression he gets when something has happened. You know this expression. You've been reading his face for 9 years. What? He sits down at the table, takes off his cap, puts it on his knee. Billy Marsh said his mum found a bone in their Sunday pie. Billy Marsh's mum should buy her own pie and not send him to the pie shop. He said it wasn't a... Will pauses, considers. He said it wasn't a proper bone. You look at him. Cat bone, he says quietly. That's what she said. The neighbour told her. You keep your face very still. This is not a new story. You've heard variants of it for as long as you've lived in London. The story of the pie shops. The cheap ones. The penny ones. The ones on side streets where you can get a hot meat pie for a price that makes no arithmetic sense if the filling were actually what it says, and what they put in them. The stories, the dog meat, the horse meat, the things that aren't meat at all but approximate its texture when heavily seasoned. You've bought from those pie shops. Not often, because the cost adds up even at a penny. But on the days when the cooking fire in the kitchen was taken over by another family and you had nothing else, you say, "We won't be buying pies from that shop." "We haven't in a month," Will says. He's 9 and doing arithmetic in his head the same way you do. He knows where the money goes. Good. Mum. He pauses again. Is the stuff we eat safe? This is a 9-year-old asking a serious question. He deserves a serious answer. But the serious answer is complicated because the serious answer is mostly probably as safe as you can make it with what we have. What you say is, the things I buy are things I check. The bread, the vegetables, the meat from Agnes. I know what to look for. He looks at you with the bright, serious eyes of a child who's processing this. What do you look for? And you sit down across from him, and for 20 minutes before you need to get the pot and sort out the noon meal, you tell him, the way your mother told you, how to squeeze a loaf, how to smell fish for freshness, how to look at meat colour and texture, how to check a vegetable for the soft spots that mean it's further gone than the seller is admitting. It is, you realise, the most important lesson anyone could teach him. Not reading, not arithmetic, not the geography lessons Mr. Potts gives them about places they'll never go. This is how you survive. Thursday arrives the way all the bad days arrive. Not dramatically, but with a kind of grinding inevitability. The trotter broth was the last hot meal on Wednesday evening. This morning there's bread, you've got half the loaf left, and a small heel of hard cheese that's been in the corner of the shelf for 4 days and is getting philosophical about its place in the world. You scrape a bit of the rind off, cube what's underneath, divide it into 5 pieces that are too small to be called portions and too honest to be called anything else. Thomas doesn't ask. He eats what you put in front of him and he doesn't ask. You love him for that, and occasionally you hate him for it too, in the private way that isn't really about him. It's about the fact that there's never enough and someone has to notice. And you're the one who notices, and sometimes you want someone else to take a turn noticing. You don't say any of this. You eat your smaller piece of bread and your cube of cheese and drink your tea, which is actually second brewing on yesterday's tea leaves because the tea itself is one of the smaller luxuries you allow yourself, and you get 2 cycles out of every measure. After Thomas leaves and the children are sorted, Will to school, James and Ellen in the room with a task each because idle children are children who get into things. You go through the larder shelf properly for the first time since Monday. Inventory, your mother would have called it. The shelf holds half a loaf of bread hardening at the cut end, a small turnip you saved out of yesterday's pot, 4 potatoes, the softening ones from the market by, a half cup of dried split peas that have been there since September, the heels of a jar of treacle, maybe a tablespoon, some oats, some salt, a scraping of lard in a pot that's seen better days, and 1 and 4pence in the purse, because you need to keep something back for absolute emergencies, and you've been defining absolute emergency ever more broadly as the week goes on. You can make something from this. You can always make something. Split peas go in water to soak now, and by evening they'll be soft enough to cook. The soft potatoes and the turnip will go in with them, and the laird will add fat to the broth, and the bread, the hardened bread, will be sliced thin and used to thicken the soup in the way they've been thickening soups with stale bread since medieval times. Because bread and water and salt can actually produce something that tastes of dinner if you know what you're doing. But it means another day without protein, and Ellen's cough has been worse the last 2 nights, and you've been trying not to think about that too directly. There's a woman in the next street, a Mrs. Drummond, who has more knowledge about this sort of thing than anyone else you know. She's maybe 60, tall and lean, with the deliberate movements of someone who has long since stopped hurrying and found that things happen anyway. She was before she became a widow and came to live with her daughter, a cook in a household in Kensington. Not a grand household, a middling one, the kind that had a cook but not a French cook, the kind where the cook was expected to produce good family food on a reasonable budget rather than elaborate dinner parties. But it means she spent 40 years thinking professionally about how to feed people. You knock on her door at 10 o'clock. Her room is warmer than yours. She has coal that her daughter provides, and smells of something cooking, a slow, herby smell. She's got a small pot at the fire. "Barley broth," she says, seeing you look. "Mary's bringing home a bit of scraggin from work tonight, so I'm getting the broth going early." Her daughter works as a kitchen maid in a larger house. She sometimes brings home cooking scraps. This is another thing nobody talks about directly, the economy of kitchen scraps. The bones and pan drippings and vegetable water that gets thrown out of wealthy kitchens that could feed a family for a day. Some cooks give it out, some save it for a neighbour, some sell it at a halfpenny a jug. The people who rely on this aren't stealing. They're existing within a system where the wealthy produce waste and the poor find uses for it. "Sit," Mrs. Drummond says. You sit. You tell her about Ellen, the cough at night, the thinness, the milk you've been buying from the boy. Mrs. Drummond is quiet for a moment. She stirs her broth with a long spoon, slowly. "Stop the milk," she says, "or boil it first, every time. Bring it to a boil and let it cool. Will that help? It will kill what's in it that shouldn't be. Some things you can't fix with boiling, but some things you can. You file this away. Boil the milk first." Another small calculation added to the day. "Her cough," Mrs. Drummond says. "Is it worse in the morning or in the evening?" "Morning, and at night when she first lies down. Cold air, damp. The room's cold. We have the small fire." She makes a sound, not judgment, just acknowledging what she knows about small fires in cold rooms. "Sweat," she says. "If you can get a bit of suet, beef suet, and heat it and give it to her with a bit of treacle, it coats, and keep her head above the rest of her when she sleeps. Bit of a pillow under, stops the mucus settling. You file this away too." "And feed her," Mrs. Drummond says, "as much as you can. Small children need fat and they need regular food, and she needs to be eating more often than the rest of you." She pauses. "I know that's not helpful when there's only so much." "No," you say. "It's helpful to know." She looks at you with the particular expression of one woman who understands food poverty looking at another. Not pity, just recognition. "Friday's your day," she says, meaning payday. "Should be, if Thomas's foreman pays on time. Come find me Friday afternoon. I'll have the barley water from this." She gestures at the pot. "And you can take some for Ellen. Won't hurt. Might help." You thank her and go home. The walk back takes 3 minutes, and you spend 2 of them fighting down the feeling that fills your chest sometimes. Not quite panic, not quite grief. Something between the two that you've never had a name for. The feeling of being very precisely at the limit of what you can manage. Of watching a child who needs more than you can currently give her. Of having done everything right, and still being in a place where right isn't quite enough. You take a breath, let it out. Then you go inside and start making the split pea soup, and you focus on that, because the soup is something you can fix. Friday comes. Thomas is home by 7 in the evening, earlier than usual, which means the shift ended on time and the foreman didn't find reasons to hold anyone back. He comes through the door and his face is the face of a man who is tired in his bones but has done what he set out to do. He puts 14 shillings and sixpence on the table, not 15. He's been docked a half shilling for something. He explains it in the brief way he explains these things, something about a broken tool and the cost being taken from his pay, and you accept this with the equanimity you've developed around the small financial cruelties that are part of life at this wage level. 14 and 6. You adjust. You take the money and put it in the purse and you do the week's accounting in your head. Coal, bread, basics, and you'll make it. Not comfortably, but you'll make it. Thomas eats, and the children eat, and after they're sorted and settled, Will has homework from Mr. Potts, a piece of writing he's working on with his tongue poking out. James is asleep already. Ellen is breathing clearly tonight, the cough absent for now. You sit by the small fire in the room with Thomas. He doesn't say much. He rarely does in the evenings. But tonight he says, "How was the week?" You tell him. Not everything. You don't tell him about the bone-in-the-pie conversation with Will, or the full extent of your worry about Ellen. You tell him the week was fine. The market prices, the bread situation with Hargreaves, the soup you made on Thursday that stretched further than expected. He listens with the attentive quiet of a man who understands that this is its own labour, what you do. He's never said this directly, but he listens the way you listen to something that matters. "She looks better tonight," he says, Ellen. "Mrs. Drummond gave me some barley water for her." He nods. "Saturday," he says. "I could take Will to the market with me in the morning." You look at him. "You don't need to." "I know." A pause. "Want to." He should see where things come from. You think about your own morning last Wednesday at 4:30 in the cold, the weight of the bag, the negotiations. You think about telling Will how to check a loaf and how that felt. "Take him to Smithfield," you say. You let him see the cattle coming in. Thomas raises an eyebrow. "That's not a sight for—" He's 9. He eats meat when we have it. He should know what that costs. Not money. The other cost. A pause. "All right," Thomas says. Saturday morning. Early. You're up at the usual time, but this morning you send Will down to meet his father at 5:30, with a strict instruction to do exactly what Thomas says and not touch anything. Will is vibrating with the particular energy of a child given unusual permission. They come back at 8:30. Will's face is something that's hard to describe. He's pale. He's also wide-eyed in a way that isn't quite the usual way. He's been somewhere that has permanently added itself to his mental map of what the world is. Smithfield is the great cattle market of London. On Monday and Friday mornings, cattle and sheep and pigs are driven through the city streets from the drovers' roads that feed into London from the north, their hooves filling the cobblestones with a sound like continuous thunder, their smell preceding them by half a mile. The animals are confused and frightened and sometimes dangerous. Accidents happen. A man was killed by a bull in St. John Street 2 years ago. The market itself is noise and smell that the words chaos and overwhelming only gesture at. It's the combined smell of thousands of animals, their manure, the blood from the nearby slaughterhouses, the sweat of the drovers, the metallic cold of a November morning mixed with animal heat. It's the sound of lowing and bleating and barking and shouting and the percussion of the livestock pens. Will has been there. He has seen the animals waiting. He has seen one being led away. He has smelled everything. "Are you all right?" you ask him. He thinks about this very seriously for a moment. "I think so." Thomas is drinking his tea and watching Will over the rim of the cup. "What did you think?" you ask Will. Another pause. The cows looked frightened. Yes. And the men were very rough with them. Yes, but... He stops, starts again. But it's where the meat comes from. We need the meat. We do. He nods. He's working out the moral geometry of this, and he won't have it solved by noon, or by next year probably. But he's started working it out, and that's what matters. Can I have breakfast? He says. Yes, sit down. Saturday evening is the Sunday preparation. Because Sunday is the thing that holds the week together, the Sunday joint, this is not optional. This is not a luxury. This is the pillar that the rest of the week's eating is built around, and the economics of it are precise enough that they've been refined over generations. You know them the same way you know how to make tea in 2 brewings. Not because you learned them from a book, but because they were shown to you and they work and they're the way it's done. On Saturday evening, before you do anything else, you go to the butcher. Not Agnes on Union Street. Agnes closes her stall by afternoon. You go to the shop butcher on the high street, a proper shop with a marble counter and sawdust on the floor. Not because it's better quality, but because on Saturday evening they want to move the last of the week's meat, and the last of the week's meat is the most affordable. You buy a piece of brisket. Not large, enough. The brisket is cheap because it's a working muscle, tough, heavily fibred, the kind of cut that, if you cook it fast, is nearly inedible, the kind that, if you cook it slowly and with patience, becomes something else entirely. The piece costs you 7 pence. It's about 2 pounds of meat, raw weight. It will cook down. What comes out of the oven will feed 5 people for Sunday dinner and provide bones and fat for Monday. You carry it home in the paper, the butcher wraps it in. Now comes the other Saturday ritual. Your fireplace upstairs is too small for proper oven cooking. Most people in your street are in the same situation. And this is where one of the great unwritten social institutions of Victorian London comes in. One that nobody in the history books much mentions, but which shaped how working people ate on Sunday for about 200 years. The baker's oven. Saturday evening and Sunday morning before the church bells ring for the first service, the neighbourhood baker, not Hargreaves in this case, but a woman named Mrs. Plunkett who runs the bakehouse on Weber Street, rents out her ovens. The logic is this. She's been baking all week. The oven is hot, and on Saturday afternoon the bread is done. The oven's going to cool down over the weekend anyway, so she charges a halfpenny a joint for families to bring their Sunday meat on Saturday evening, and she'll cook it overnight in the residual heat of the bread oven, and you come to collect it Sunday morning before church. Half the street does this. Saturday evening you walk to Mrs. Plunkett's with your piece of brisket in a clay pot. Your pot, brought from the kitchen with the lid tied on with a bit of cord, and a small piece of paper with your name on it, which Mrs. Plunkett will tuck under the pot so she can tell them apart. You've brought potatoes in the pot too, sitting round the brisket, because the oven will cook them at the same time, and it costs nothing extra, and it means half the Sunday dinner is sorted without you standing over a fire. Mrs. Plunkett's bakehouse is warm in a way that almost brings tears to your eyes. The residual heat from a full day's baking fills the room. Not hot, not actively cooking heat, but the deep warmth of stone and brick that's been heated for 8 hours, slowly releasing it now into the cool evening air. She has 7 other pots already lined up on her side bench. 7 other families' Sunday dinners, waiting. I'll put yours in the middle section, she says. Better heat distribution. She's done this for 20 years, and she knows every corner of that oven the way you know every corner of your room. You hand over the halfpenny. She makes a note in her book. You go home, and the brisket will cook overnight, and in the morning you'll collect it, and the smell when you lift the clay pot lid will be the smell of the week's promise kept. Sunday itself is the day that deserves proper attention. You collect the pot from Mrs. Plunkett at 8:30 in the morning. The pot is hot through the clay. You carry it with both hands, your shawl wrapped around it as insulation, and you can feel the heat through the fabric. The smell, even through the clay, even from outside the smell drifts out, makes your children, who walked with you, press closer. "Is it done?" James asks. If Mrs. Plunkett says it's done, it's done. Will is carrying Ellen on his back because her legs are short and the morning is cold, and she asked. He grips her legs with practised hands. Home. The pot goes on the kitchen table. You have the kitchen to yourselves on Sunday morning, by an informal arrangement that the 4 families in the house have arrived at without ever quite discussing, and you lift the lid. The smell that comes out is so good it's almost an event. The brisket has been in the oven for 14 hours at very low heat, and it's done what brisket does when treated properly. It's surrendered. The tough muscle fibres have broken down, released their collagen into the pot, turned the cooking liquid into something glossy and rich. The meat is so tender that when you touch it with the back of a spoon it pulls apart. The potatoes have soaked up the fat and the meat juices and a dark gold on the outside. Will says softly, "Oh." You think about the cows at Smithfield. You think about what he saw yesterday, about the frightened eyes, about the rough men with the sticks, and you think, this is why. This is the full picture. Not just the market and the cost and the arithmetic. This too. This smell. This pot. This table about to be full. The Sunday dinner table is the closest your family gets to what you'd call ceremony. Thomas is home from his morning walk, and he comes in through the door and the smell hits him, and his face does a thing it almost never does. Softens. Will lays the table with the concentration he gives to important tasks. James puts himself in his chair 3 minutes early and waits with visible effort. Ellen is already on her bench, hands in her lap, sitting very straight. You serve. Thomas gets the largest portion, with 2 potatoes and the outer sections of the brisket that have the most flavour, the caramelised edges. Will gets the next portion. James gets a portion you've measured generously, because he's 6 and growing. Ellen gets a portion you've shredded fine for her small hands and teeth, with extra potato mashed in the juices. You take what's left. What's left is a good plate. More than enough. Today is a good day. No one speaks while eating. This is not rudeness. This is the universal language of a family that's been waiting for this meal. The sound is the sound of spoons on plates, and the small involuntary sounds people make when food is genuinely good. Thomas breaks the silence first. Mrs. Plunkett knows her business, he says. She always has. Should have had her cook the potatoes differently. You look at him. He has the slight curve at the corner of his mouth that is, for Thomas, the equivalent of a broad grin. The potatoes are perfect, you say. He says, which means, yes, they are. Ellen, unprompted, says, more. You give her more. After the dishes are done, Will washes, you dry. James handed a cloth and given the task of helping in a way that mostly means waving the cloth in the direction of a cup. You have the bones. This is important. The bones and the cooking liquid left in the pot are not waste. They are Monday. You carry the pot back upstairs. Set it in the coolest corner of the room, where the air from the window gap keeps it cold. Tonight the fat will rise and solidify on top, and tomorrow morning you'll skim it off. That's cooking fat free, made from what the beef gave up, and under it will be the jellied stock, dense and trembling, dark amber in colour. Monday, that stock becomes soup. The bones go back in with water, with more vegetables if you have them, with salt and whatever other odds and ends the beginning of the week has available. Monday's soup is better than anything you made from scratch on Thursday, because it has the bones gift in it, the marrow, the collagen, the slow-cooked flavour that only comes from long heat. Tuesday, if there's stock left, it goes on bread, or it becomes a sauce. Wednesday, the bones themselves, if they're soft enough, which after 2 days in liquid they usually are, can be cracked and the marrow spooned out and spread on toast. Bone marrow on toast. It sounds like something a grand chef would serve at a dinner party. In your house, it's Wednesday's breakfast option on a good week. Nothing is wasted. Nothing. The instruction waste not, want not, has always struck you as an instruction designed by people who had something to waste. In your house, it's not a moral principle. It's just how cooking works. You use everything because everything is something. The potato peelings go to Mrs. Kelly's pig in the yard. The bacon rind, when you have bacon, goes in the soup. The hardened bread heel goes in the pot to thicken. The bones are the centre of all of it. A good set of Sunday bones, properly managed, can feed a family of 5 from Sunday to Wednesday. That's 4 days of nourishment from what cost you 7p on Saturday. This is the arithmetic your grandmother's grandmother knew. This is what built the stews and soups and broths that working people have been eating since there were working people and ovens, not out of tradition, out of pure necessity that happened to produce wisdom. Monday starts before you want it to. The bells at 4:30, the cold floor, the dark room, the same ritual as every morning. But today you have the pot of stock in the corner, cold from the night, the fat solid on top. Before the fire is lit in the kitchen, before anything else, you skim the fat. It comes up in a clean white disc, beautiful in its usefulness, and set it in the small pot you keep for cooking fat. Put the stock on as soon as the kitchen fire is going. Mrs. Kelly comes down at 5:30, moving with the same Monday morning energy you feel in your own body. She looks at your pot on the fire, registers the smell of the stock beginning to warm and nods slightly. "Good bones," she says. "Decent. She cooked it long enough." Mrs. Kelly has her own pot going. Something smells of cabbage and salt, and for a few minutes you're both standing at the fire in silence, not quite companionably, but not unpleasantly either, watching the pots. 2 women in the same building running the same calculations through the same small kitchen. "Tommy's working the docks again," she says eventually. "Full week?" "Should be. Foreman likes him when the work's there." "Good." Silence again. The stock is starting to move. Small bubbles at the edges. "Ellen better?" she asks. "Some," you say. "Mrs. Drummond's barley water helped, and I've been boiling the milk before she has it." Mrs. Kelly makes a sound that's half acknowledgement and half something else. "My Bridget had the same thing 2 years ago. Same time of year, same cough." You look at her. "She got through it," Mrs. Kelly says. Not gently exactly, but with the firmness of someone offering actual information. "Got through it, and then she was fine. They usually get through it if you keep them warm and keep them fed." You nod, file it away, add it to the collection of knowledge you carry in your head, alongside the price of liver and how to stretch a trotter. They usually get through it if you keep them warm and keep them fed. That's the whole of medicine for most of the 19th century. Keep them warm, keep them fed, hope. The middle of the week brings a problem that isn't the kind of problem you can solve with arithmetic. It's Thursday. You've made it work. Again, just barely. The pea soup on the nights when the stock ran out. the bread with lard when there wasn't anything else. Thomas comes home with his wages intact, which is a relief. But Thursday afternoon, coming back from the standpipe with the water pail, you see something that you should have seen sooner and didn't. The milk boy. You've been buying from him 3 times a week. You've been boiling it, the way Mrs. Drummond said. Ellen seems to be improving. The cough is down, the colour is slightly better. She ate her full share of pea soup 2 nights running without complaint. But this morning you were watching him ladle the milk into your jar, and you watched where his other hand went while he held the ladle, and you saw him top up the can from a pail of water he had on the other side of the cart, right in front of you. So practiced he didn't even glance around. You stood there with your jar of half milk. The thing about that moment is that you knew. You already knew. Mrs. Drummond told you to boil it. The reason you boil it is precisely because it isn't clean. You knew. But seeing it, seeing the hand go from the water pail to the milk can without pause, without apology, is different from knowing abstractly. You said nothing. You took your jar. You walked home. You boiled the milk, as usual, but you've been thinking about it ever since. Here's what you know about the system that puts food on your table. There are men in Parliament who are working right now on legislation to deal with food adulteration. You know this because Mrs. Drummond mentioned it, and because the conversation that filters through neighbourhoods like yours, the information that lives in the queue at the standpipe and the queue at the market, is sometimes more accurate than the newspapers when it concerns things that matter to the people standing in the queue. There's been a man, Dr. Hassall, who wrote the report Mrs. Drummond mentioned, who's been examining London's food for years and publishing what he finds. The bread, the milk, the coffee, which is cut with chicory and sometimes sawdust, the pepper, which contains floor sweepings, the vinegar, which has sulfuric acid in it to give it the bite that actual vinegar should have. The list is longer than you want to know. But here's the other thing you know. The people who eat adulterated food are the people who can't afford not to. The wealthy have options. They can afford the farm delivery, the dairy that certifies its cows, the grocer whose reputation depends on quality because his customers would leave if the quality slipped. You don't have those options. You buy from who you can afford, and who you can afford is not always who tells you the truth about what they're selling. This isn't fatalism. You check what you can check. You negotiate what you can negotiate. You boil the milk and press the loaf, and look at the liver colour before you put it in your basket. But you can't inspect the alum out of the bread, or the water out of the milk, or the sulfuric acid out of the vinegar. Those are invisible violations. The law will eventually catch up to this. You can feel it in the conversation around you, the growing sense that what's happening to working people's food is a scandal that someone should fix, that it shouldn't be the responsibility of a woman with 3 and 4pence in her purse to individually protect her family from systematic fraud. But the law isn't here yet. It's coming. In 5 years there will be an Adulteration of Food Act. In 20 years it will be stricter. In 50 years there will be inspectors and standards, and something approaching accountability. You won't see all of it, but you'll see some. The weeks continue. Winter moves. February arrives with a particular misery. The cold hasn't broken, but the novelty has, and there's a tired quality to the cold that the early part of winter doesn't have. The morning market feels harsher. The standpipe is problematic most days. The bread price has gone up again, and the conversation with Hargreaves has escalated to something approaching genuine hostility, which you handle by starting to buy alternately from a different baker 3 streets further away, which solves the Hargreaves problem but adds 15 minutes to the morning round. 15 minutes at 5 in the morning is its own small hardship. But here's what you've learned in 7 years of making this work. There's always something. Always a new pressure. Always a new calculation to make. Always another item in the column of things that cost more than they should. And you make the calculation. Every morning, every market, every pot. Because the alternative is not making it, and not making it is not an option. Not when you have 5 people who depend on the calculation coming out right. Spring. The way spring arrives in London isn't like the spring in the countryside. It doesn't come all at once. It comes in layers. A day in February that's merely cold rather than brutal. A week in March where you can leave your heaviest shawl at home one morning and not regret it by noon. The window boxes in the houses down the street beginning to show something. A tentative green, fragile, unconvinced. And then the smell changes. Not overnight, but you notice it one morning at the market around the first week of April as you're looking at the first spring vegetables. Not good yet, not the full abundance of summer, but first things pale and young, and you realise the air smells different. Not better, exactly. London air in 1855 is not ever exactly good, but lighter. The weight of coal smoke and damp cold has shifted slightly. There's something underneath it that might generously be described as fresh. The children feel it too. James wakes up one April morning with the energy of a creature that's been waiting for something it can't name and has now sensed it's arrived. He eats his breakfast standing up. You tell him to sit down. He sits down. He stands up again. You give up. Will goes to school with his cap tilted back, which is his version of celebration. Ellen sits in the window of your room in the mornings and watches the street. She's 4 now, which happened last month with the quietness of birthdays in households without money for ceremony. You made her a small cake with the last of the treacle and the last of the lard and some flour, baked in the clay pot at Mrs. Plunkett's, and she ate it with a seriousness that suggested she understood its significance. She's completely well. The winter cough gone as if it never was. You stand in the window of your room on an April morning with the light coming in, and Ellen beside you watching the street, and you think, we made it through. Simple as that. We made it through. The arithmetic held. The system held. The bones stretched and the soup lasted, and the bread was pressed and the milk was boiled, and the knowledge was enough. Another winter behind you, another spring ahead. Spring also means the market changes. By May, the Union Street market has transformed from the November market almost entirely. The stalls that held root vegetables and stored cabbage through the cold months are now showing things that didn't exist 3 weeks ago. Fresh peas, early salad greens, radishes, spring onions, the first tender carrots of the year. These things are more expensive when they first appear. The price of novelty, of earliness, of the season's first good things. Then they become abundant, and the price falls. You know the rhythm. You wait. In June, the abundance starts. Strawberries appear, and you buy a small punnet. A genuine extravagance, no justification. Just the sight of them sitting in the basket of a costermonger, who's calling her price in a voice that carries half the street. And you take them home and give them to the children. The look on Ellen's face when she puts the first strawberry in her mouth. Worth it. Every calculation has this moment somewhere in it. The moment that isn't arithmetic but is still real. The moment that feeds the part of a family that lives somewhere above the stomach. The strawberries cost 3p. You don't regret it for a second. Summer changes the kitchen problem in ways you don't always anticipate. In winter, The challenge is cold and scarcity and the cost of fuel. In summer, the challenge is heat and spoilage and the fact that food doesn't keep. You have no ice. Ice in 1855 London is available. There's an ice trade brought in from Norway in ships and stored in the great ice houses round the city, sold to restaurants and wealthy households. But it costs money you don't have. What you have is the coolest corner of the room, which in summer is not very cool. Meat bought on a Monday morning in June will not last until Thursday the way November meat lasts. By Tuesday evening in the heat, the smell will tell you where the limit is. You've learned that smell precisely. The exact moment when something is acceptable, and the moment after that when it's not. You've also learned that the sellers know this, and that some of them price accordingly. Slightly too cheap on Tuesday afternoon for the meat that won't make it to Wednesday. Catch it at that price, cook it immediately, eat it that night. The timing is everything. Summer also changes the market hours. Everything pushes earlier because by 10 in the morning the heat is building, and the food that can't be kept is starting to show it. You're out at 4 instead of half 4 in summer. You're back by 7 instead of 8. You lose half an hour of sleep. You've long since stopped noticing. The street sellers are their own world inside the world, and they deserve proper attention. You encounter them every day on the way to and from the market, on the errands to suppliers, on the Sunday walks. They're as much a part of the food infrastructure of London as the market stalls or the shops. More, in some ways, because they come to you rather than requiring you to come to them. The costermongers, that's the proper name, though most people just say the sellers or describe what they sell, are a distinct social class in 1855 London. They have their own culture, their own routes and territories, their own relationship with the police, their own hierarchy, their own marriages and debts and ambitions. A costermonger doesn't just sell things. A costermonger is always a person with a story. The woman you see every Tuesday on the corner of Stony Street and Borough High Street, the one with the basket of watercress that she holds up in one hand and calls out in a voice that carries 3 streets, her name is Nan. She's 40-something, built wide and solid, with a face that's been outside in all weathers for 20 years and shows it. She buys her watercress at Farringdon Market before 5 in the morning, having walked there from her room in Suffolk. She sells until she's sold everything, which takes until about noon if it's a good day, until 3 if it's a bad one. What she earns on a good Tuesday, maybe 1.03 shillings, is her total income. There's no wage behind it, no employer, no safety net. If the watercress is bad, if the weather keeps customers inside, if a competing costermonger sets up on her corner, her income for that day drops to whatever fraction of normal she can salvage. She has 2 children. You don't know where they are during the hours she's selling. You've never asked. The watercress she sells is genuinely fresh. You buy from Nan sometimes when you have the extra penny. Watercress doesn't need cooking. You put it on the table and the children eat it like a salad, which is what it is. And the green taste of it is something that has no equivalent in a winter of root vegetables and bread and soup. 4 bunches for a penny. This is one of the genuinely good deals available to the working poor of London. There's a man who sells eels. You've been aware of him for 3 years. He works from a barrow, a long, low cart he pushes himself, laden with tanks of water in which live eels are kept. This is a practical arrangement. Live eels don't spoil. He can push his barrow through the neighbourhood all day, selling eels to order, and as long as the water is changed regularly and the eels don't die of the city's heat in summer, he has fresh product whenever anyone wants it. Jellied eels, pie and mash, stewed eels. These are not exotic dishes. These are the food of London's working poor in 1855, as much as bread and potatoes. The eel trade in London is enormous. The eels come up the Thames from the estuary, caught by the Thames fishermen, sold at Billingsgate, distributed through the city by men like the one with the barrow. You've bought from him. The eels are 6pence a pound, and a pound of eel, cooked down in water with bay leaf and the corner of a lemon, will produce enough jellied eel to feed the children for a midday meal, and leave the jelly itself to be spread cold on bread the following morning. The gelatin in eel jelly is nutritious in a way that not many people name directly. It's protein and collagen and fat, extracted from the eel's bones and skin into the cooking liquid, set cold into a trembling richness. Children who eat it are getting things their bodies need. It's not fashionable food. It's not the food of aspiration. But it does what food is supposed to do. The pie shop problem deserves its full treatment, because pies are complicated. In one version, a pie is the best thing available to a working-class Londoner who needs a hot meal in the middle of the day and has neither the time to go home and cook nor the facilities to heat something. A hot meat pie from a good pie shop, eaten standing in the street, is genuinely nourishing and genuinely satisfying and genuinely hot, which in November is not a small thing. In the other version, a pie is a mystery wrapped in pastry. The pastry itself is usually honest. It's flour and water and whatever fat the baker could get cheapest, crimped into shape and baked. The pastry is fine. It's the filling. The filling in a street pie sold for a penny or a halfpenny is constrained by arithmetic in the same way your household cooking is constrained, except that the arithmetic is from the other direction. The shop is trying to sell a penny pie at a profit, which means the filling must cost less than a penny before labour and fuel and the pastry itself. This is a very small number. In the honest shops, offal, kidney, liver, heart, the same things you buy from Agnes but minced fine and heavily seasoned. It's not glamorous, but it's real meat and it feeds people. In the less honest shops, things with a broader definition of meat. Horse meat is the main one. London's horses die constantly. The working horses that pull the cabs and the carts and the omnibuses worked until they can't work anymore, sold at the end to knackers who extract what value they can. Some goes to legitimate use. Some goes to the pie shops. The taste is different from beef, slightly sweeter, slightly darker, a texture that doesn't quite behave like beef under cooking. But heavily seasoned and encased in pastry, most people don't notice. What you do is this. You know which pie shops are honest, and you eat from those and nowhere else. And on the days when you're passing a pie shop you don't know, you don't buy, no matter how good it smells. Because the smell is from the pastry and the seasoning, not the filling. The smell is the same regardless. This is another lesson that can't be learned from a book. The coal question underlies everything. You don't spend a lot of time thinking about coal in the abstract, but coal is the thing everything else depends on, more than food itself almost. Because without fire you can't cook, and without cooking, raw food is not food. Not the food you're working with. Fire is not optional. Fire is the technology that turns your market purchases into dinner. Coal costs money. The amount of coal a household like yours uses in a week is a regular, predictable, non-negotiable expense that runs alongside food in the household arithmetic. In winter, more. In summer, less. But always some. You buy coal by the hundredweight, £112 sacked, from the coal merchant who comes through the street every Thursday morning with his cart. The price per hundredweight varies. In October, it starts going up. By January, it's at its winter peak. In April, it starts coming down. The timing of your coal purchases is therefore partly strategic. You buy more in September, when the price hasn't peaked yet, and store it in the corner of the yard under a piece of oilcloth. You buy less in January using your store. This requires having money to buy ahead, which requires not being entirely hand-to-mouth in September, which requires the summer having been a good enough season to leave a margin. This is the kind of planning that doesn't exist in the popular imagination of working-class Victorian life. The idea that poor people don't plan ahead, that they live day to day without strategy. You plan 6 months ahead for coal. You plan a week ahead for food. You plan 10 minutes ahead for the fire that will determine whether breakfast is hot or cold. Planning is all you do. The difference between your planning and the planning of the wealthy is that they plan in amounts that leave a margin for error. You plan in amounts where the margin is the planning. There's an art to building a fire that holds well. You learned it from your mother, who learned it from hers. The fire in the kitchen grate is not just lit, it's constructed. Layer by layer, the crumpled paper first if you have paper, or dried leaves if you don't, or lint saved from washing. Then the kindling, thin pieces of wood, split fine, laid in a crosshatch pattern that allows air to circulate. Then the small coal, not the big pieces, the small coal that catches quickly and generates heat without requiring an established flame to get going. And the specific move, the coal dust, pressed into a paste with water and laid around the outside of the arrangement. Coal dust is cheaper than coal and burns in this configuration, with a steady heat that extends the life of the more expensive pieces. You waste nothing. The dust swept from the coal pile, the stuff that falls to the bottom of the sack, goes in this paste. Your fire catches in 3 minutes regularly. First time every morning. This is not luck. This, the other women in the kitchen, Ruth now and the new woman from the top floor who arrived in the autumn, a quiet person named Margaret who works sewing in a factory and says little and sees everything. They've all learned from watching you. Ruth can now build the fire almost as quickly. Margaret is still slower but improving. You've never taught anyone directly. You just do it where they can see. The knowledge passes on. In June, something happens that's been building for months. Mrs. Kelly comes to you on a Tuesday morning and she sits at your table with the look of a woman who has something to say that she's not sure how to start. You put the kettle on. She says, "Tommy's been offered work in Manchester." Manchester, 200 miles north. A city you've never been to that exists in your imagination as industrial and different and very far away. Factory work, you ask? Loom operation. His brother knows someone who manages it. Steady wages, more than the docks. You pour the tea, set it in front of her. "You're going," you say. It's not a question. She wraps her hands around the mug, looks at the table. "We're thinking on it. The children, it's a chance for them." A pause. "More space than this." "You don't say. You've been the centre of this building's life since before you arrived." You don't say, "Who will I talk to at the kitchen fire at 5:30 in the morning?" You don't say any of it. You say, "When?" End of the month. End of June. 3 weeks. You drink your tea. "Manchester's got good markets," you say. This is possibly not true. You have no idea whether Manchester's markets are good, but it's something to say that's about the future and not the gap she's going to leave in the house. She looks at you, almost smiles. "I've heard that," she says, even though she hasn't heard that either. They leave on a Thursday morning, the Kellys, with everything they own packed into a cart going to the rail station. 6 children in various states of excitement and distress. Mrs. Kelly in a heavy shawl with her face set in the expression of a woman crossing a decision line. She stops in the kitchen before they go, looks around it, the fire, the hooks, the low window onto the yard. "You'll be all right," she says, to you, direct. "I know," you say. "You know how to do this. So do you." She nods once, the specific nod that contains a whole conversation, and then they're gone, and the kitchen feels different without her pot, and the house feels different without the sound of 6 children. You stand in the kitchen for a moment by yourself, then you put the pot on. What else is there to do? New family moves in by August. A couple with 2 small children from somewhere in the countryside. The look of people who've arrived recently and haven't yet learned the particular competencies of city life. The woman is named Ruth, and she stands in the kitchen the first morning with the look of someone trying to understand a system whose rules nobody has explained. You explain them, not all at once, but over several mornings, in the shorthand of 2 women at the same fire, you tell her. The market hours, the vegetable stall to trust and the one to avoid, the way Hargreaves operates and how to handle him, the potato cellar with the soft ones, the price of liver per £1/2 and what constitutes a fair price, how to boil the milk. She listens with the focused attention of a person who knows they're receiving important information and doesn't want to miss any of it. This is the network. You were on the receiving end of it once. A younger woman, newer, not knowing the streets or the stalls or the prices, standing in the queue at the standpipe trying to look like you knew where you were. Someone told you something that mattered, and then someone else. And it built up over years into the thing you carry now, and now you're the one telling. It passes on. It always passes on. A year later, in the autumn, a piece of news works its way through the neighbourhood via the information channels that carry such things. The standpipe queue, the morning market, the kitchen fire, and it reaches you on a Tuesday morning in October. The government has passed a law about food adulteration. It's called the Adulteration of Food and Drink Act, and it passed in 1860. And what it says, in the version that filters through the queue by the standpipe, is that putting things in food that aren't supposed to be in food is now, formally, against the law. That there will be inspectors, that there will be penalties. Ruth tells you this, who has learned the market thoroughly in the year she's lived here, and is now the person who tells other people things. "Will it help?" she asks. You think about the bread, the milk, the years of pressing and boiling and checking. Some, you say, probably some. Not completely. It's never completely, she nods. She's learned that too, but some, something. The pressure that built up from all the women who knew and checked and watched and noticed. The pressure finally arriving somewhere official, being written into law, being made into something that couldn't be simply ignored. The summer crisis, when it comes fast. It comes in July. The temperature climbs. London in summer is not dramatically hot by any modern standard, but it doesn't need to be dramatic to be dangerous. What it needs to be is persistent and combined with the specific conditions of London. The density of people and animals, the river low in its banks, the accumulated heat of 10,000 coal fires, and the industry that runs on them, all of it sitting in the bowl of the city without the wind to disperse it. The smell in July is its own subject, the river first, the Thames in summer, with its load of everything that London puts into it. Industrial waste, household waste, slaughterhouse waste, the outflow of 500,000 chamber pots that flow through drainage systems, designed by no one for nothing, and ending up in the river. The Thames in summer produces a smell that is both specific and overwhelming. It drifts into the streets. It settles in rooms near the water and the food. The food problem in summer is the problem of keeping things from going bad. Your corner of the room is the coolest spot. You know this precisely. It's the corner farthest from the window, against the wall that faces north, where the sun doesn't reach directly. In summer, this corner might be 5 degrees cooler than the rest of the room. 5 degrees is the difference between meat that lasts 2 days and meat that's iffy on the second morning. You buy in smaller quantities in summer. More frequent trips, shorter cycles between purchase and consumption. This means more time at the market and less room for planning, which means less efficiency, which means the same money feeds you slightly less well in summer than in winter. This is counterintuitive. Summer, with its abundance of vegetables, should be easier, and it is, in some ways. But the spoilage problem eats the advantage. The milk in summer is the worst. Even boiled, milk in July heat doesn't last more than a day. You buy what you'll use that morning and no more. Ellen gets her daily milk first thing, before it's been sitting in the July heat even for an hour, and whatever's left gets used in the cooking immediately. The heat crisis of July produces several days where the temperature in your room in the afternoon is such that you relocate the children to the kitchen. The kitchen has the thick stone floor and the thick stone walls of the ground floor, and even in summer it stays cooler than the upper rooms. The fire isn't lit in the afternoons in July, so the kitchen is just a cool stone box. You bring Ellen's blanket and James brings his book, and you sit in the kitchen for the hottest 3 hours of the afternoon. Mrs. Drummond finds you there on one such afternoon. She has a piece of hard cheese wrapped in a cloth, and she cuts some off and gives it to Ellen, who accepts it gravely. Then she settles herself into the chair near the window. "How's the food lasting?" she says. "Not well, you say. The vegetables are fine. Meat I'm buying daily." "Eggs," she says. "In summer, eggs last better than meat, and they're protein. You know this, but eggs cost a penny each, or a penny 3 farthings for 6, and 6 eggs fed to 5 people means slightly over 1 egg per person, which is not quite a meal. Eggs and bread," Mrs. Drummond says, "scrambled in a pan with a bit of lard. Fill them up better than you'd think, in the heat when nobody wants heavy food anyway. You file this away." "The woman upstairs," Mrs. Drummond says. "Margaret. Her daughter's taken sick." You look at her. "The child's been vomiting 2 days. You go upstairs. Margaret is a contained person under normal circumstances, contained in her grief, contained in her worries, not a woman who asks for things easily. But when you knock and enter, her face is the face of a mother past the point of containment. The child is 5. Her name is Clara. She's lying on the bed with the particular limpness of a very sick child, and the room smells of illness, and Margaret is sitting beside her with the expression of someone who's been sitting there for 2 days without moving very much. "When did she eat last?" you say. "Yesterday morning. She won't keep anything down. Not even water?" "Small sips. She keeps trying." You look at the child. She's pale in a way that's past the normal pale. Her lips are dry. "Barley water," you say. "Do you have barley?" Margaret shakes her head. "I'll make it. Don't give her anything else until the barley water's holding down." You go to Mrs. Drummond. Mrs. Drummond has barley. You're back in the kitchen in 5 minutes with the barley water going on the fire. Just barley simmered in water and strained, cooled, a pinch of salt, a tiny bit of sugar if you can spare it, which you can. Nothing complicated. Nothing that requires the stomach to work hard. By afternoon, the child is keeping it down. By evening, she's asked for bread. She's fine by the following morning. Margaret knocks on your door on the morning after Clara is well. She stands at the door with her cap straight and her hands folded in front of her and says, "Thank you. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing." She says it with a precision that doesn't invite argument. You look at each other for a moment. "The barley water," she says. "Will you teach me? It's simple." Then it should be easy to teach. You like her, you realise. You've lived in the same building for 6 months and you've exchanged functional information and morning nods and the occasional remark about the coal price. But this is the first time you've quite liked her. "Come down to the kitchen when you're ready," you say. "I'll show you." The education happens at the kitchen fire that afternoon, while Ellen sits in the corner and watches with the owlish attention she brings to everything she's decided is worth watching. Margaret learns quickly. She has the hands of someone who's been doing detailed work. She sews for the factory, small stitches, patient and precise. And those hands transfer well to kitchen work. She measures carefully. She asks exact questions. How much barley exactly? How long to simmer? What colour should the water be? Clear, you tell her. Light gold, not thick, not cloudy. She notes this with a nod. "And the salt helps," she says. "Salt and water. Your body knows what to do with it. Give it what it recognises and it can start putting itself back together." She looks at you with the considering expression she has. "How do you know all this?" she says. "You think about it. My mother, and her mother before her, and asking questions, and trying things, and learning when they didn't work." A pause. "And Mrs. Drummond. Is there a book?" You almost laugh. "Some of it's in books, mostly the wrong books. The cookbooks assume you have more than I have to work with." You think of the cookbooks you've seen in shop windows. Mrs. Beeton is publishing, you've heard, a book of household management that's apparently very thorough, and the gap between the world those books describe and yours. The useful knowledge isn't usually written down. "That seems like a problem," Margaret says. "It is," you say. "So you just have to tell people." Autumn of 1856. Will is 11 and has started talking about his future in the way 11-year-olds do when they've been told the future is something to consider. The printer's shop is a possibility. It interests him. The way words become printed things. The way information becomes object. He's been to the printer's shop twice, on errands, and come back with the specific kind of excitement that's actually useful because it's attached to something real. James is 8 and has dismantled and reassembled the kitchen latch 3 times, each time improving something about how it works. The 3rd time it closed more smoothly than it had since you moved in. Ellen is 5 and reads everything she can get her hands on, which is limited by the fact that books cost money. She reads the printed sheets on the pie shop windows and the price boards at the market, and the labels on the jars in the baker's window. "That says best butter," she tells you one morning at the market, pointing at the sign on a stall. "I know what it says," you tell her. "Does it mean it's actually best butter?" You look at her. She's 7 years old. "Press the surface," you say. "If it's too soft, it's been mixed with something. If it's grainy, it's old." She reaches out and presses the butter with one small, serious finger. "Feels right," she says. "Good. Now remember what right feels like." She nods. The knowledge passes on. You're thinking about Ellen's future and trying to find a way to think about it, that isn't confined by what the world currently offers to a girl who can read and think and press butter correctly at the age of 5. You don't have a language for what you're imagining for her, but you're imagining it. The autumn market is the best market of the year. This is something you know, but still appreciate every autumn as if you're discovering it for the first time. The summer abundance settling into its autumn density. The vegetables with more flavour than in summer, because the cooler nights have started to concentrate what's in them. The apples arriving in their varieties, stacked at the fruit stall in colours from yellow to deep red. The late carrots, purple-shouldered, with a sweetness that the spring carrots don't have, and the cheaper prices that come with abundance. Potatoes at their autumn price just after harvest are cheaper than at any other time of year. The potato merchant on the far end of the Union Street Market is practically giving them away relative to the March price. 3p for £14 versus the winter's 5p or 6p. You buy heavily. Store what you can in the cool corner. Plan for the weeks of root vegetables that will carry you through. You buy a large marrow. They're abundant and cheap in September, practically forced on you by sellers who can't move them fast enough, and spend a Saturday afternoon with it. Marrow halved and roasted, the flesh scooped out and mixed with the last of a bit of minced meat you had from Friday, put back in the shell, baked again until the top goes brown, and the whole thing smells of something that could plausibly be mistaken for richness. The children eat it with the seriousness reserved for food that's doing something interesting. James says, "What is this? Marrow? It doesn't taste like marrow. It tastes like marrow that's been treated properly, you say." He considers this. Can we have it again? When they're cheap? He nods. This is a satisfying answer. He's been in this household long enough to understand that when they're cheap is the season, and the season is real, and waiting for it is part of how this works. In September, the coal merchant's price goes up, as it always does in September, and you look at the money in the purse and make the calculation that's the same calculation every September. How much to buy now, at this price, against how much to keep back for other things? You buy 100 weight more than you normally would. Thomas raises his eyebrows when you tell him. Not objection, just, that's a lot. Prices will be a penny higher 100 weight by November, you say. We'll use it all by February, cheaper in the long run. He nods. He trusts the arithmetic when you've run it. This is one of the things that works in your marriage that you couldn't have named when you got married at 19. The trust in each other's competencies. Thomas's competency is keeping his body in working order for 12 hours at the glassworks, which he does without drama or complaint. Your competency is keeping the household in working order on the money that work produces. Neither of you questions the other's domain. The 100 weight of coal sits in the yard corner under the oilcloth and makes you feel, in a way you can't entirely justify, safe. Winter evening, late in the year. The fire is well established. You've laid it properly. You always lay it properly. And it's been going for 3 hours, and the room has reached what passes for warm. Thomas is reading. He's not a natural reader. His schooling was minimal, and reading remains something he does slowly, carefully, with his finger under the words. But Will brings home printed sheets from the printer shop sometimes, interesting ones, and Thomas reads them in the evenings. Tonight it's something about the railway, new lines, new connections. The way the railway's already changing the food supply in ways you've felt without fully understanding. The vegetables that now arrive in London from further away than they used to, because the railway can move things faster than the old Carter routes. A strawberry from Kent can be on a London market stall the same morning it was picked rather than the following day. The fish from Grimsby arrives before it can spoil. You've benefited from this without knowing the mechanism. The food is slightly fresher, occasionally, than it used to be. The variety is slightly wider. Small changes, but real. Thomas reads about the railway, and you watch him read and think about the chain from the train to the market to the stall to your bag to the pot. Someone is driving that train right now, probably, moving something somewhere that will eventually be on someone's table. Ellen has fallen asleep with her book open. Will has gone upstairs already. James is somewhere between sleep and something else, lying on his side with his eyes not quite closed. You bank the fire, the precise arrangement of coal that will hold the heat through the night. You could do this asleep. In a way you do. Thomas puts down his paper, stretches. Good week, he says. It's not exactly a question. Fair week, you say. Better than last. Potatoes will hold until December. He nods. Ellen's eating well, he says. She is. She's sharp, he says. Meaning the reading, the butter pressing, the serious eyes on everything. She is, you say again. He looks at you. The particular look that means he's thinking something he's not quite going to say. She could do something, he says. She will do something. He nods. He believes you. Not because you've presented an argument, because you said it with the certainty that means you know. The fire settles into its banked position. The room gets quieter. The sounds of the street are there. They're always there, but winter muffles them. The cold keeps people inside who aren't required to be out. The tavern noise is there but further. The carts have mostly stopped. London breathing. You sit for a moment in the chair by the fire, just one moment. The whole week in your head. The Monday bread, the Tuesday potatoes, the Wednesday broth, the Thursday pea soup that went further than expected, Friday's wages intact. The small negotiations, the coat of information you wear now. Prices and sellers and quality markers and the timing of seasons that you didn't have 7 years ago and couldn't have imagined then. 7 years of building this knowledge. This is not something you did instead of something else. It is not the lesser choice, the fallback, the thing you did because other options were absent. It is a whole expertise complete in itself, requiring intelligence and attention and patience and the specific kind of courage that isn't dramatic. The courage that's in getting up every day when it's hard and doing the work and making the arithmetic come out. You have done this every morning, every market, every pot. The fire holds its heat behind the banked coal. Tomorrow morning, the bells, the cold floor, the bag, the market, potatoes and carrots and whatever's cheap, the bread from Hargreaves, whom you're still fighting halfpennies with and always will be, both of you stuck in this negotiation that's now almost affectionate in its hostility. The trotter if the price is right, the liver if the colour is good, the milk boiled before Ellen has it, the fire built in 3 minutes, the pot on by 6, the food enough. It will be enough. It always is. Not by luck, by work, by knowledge, by the 10,000 small decisions accumulated over years into a competence so deep it looks effortless from the outside. It is not effortless. It is the opposite of effortless. It is the most sustained, most skilled, most invisible work that anyone does in this city, every day, in kitchens like this one, in 10,000 rooms like this room, in the hours before the rest of London wakes up. And tomorrow you'll do it again, same as always, but not yet. Right now, the fire is banked and the children are breathing. and Thomas is asleep in the chair, and you're still for one moment in the quiet room. Let this be enough for now. Let the quiet hold. Let the sounds outside become background, become nothing, become the gentle hum of a city that never fully stops but is tonight, as close to peaceful as it gets. The bells will come at 4:30, the floor will be cold, the bag will be waiting, but that's all still in front of you. Right now, there's just this room, this warmth, these 5 people safe and fed and resting. Everything that needed doing today has been done. Everything that needed solving has been solved or will be solved tomorrow. There's nothing left tonight but rest. Let it come. Let your eyes grow heavy the way eyes grow heavy when the body has done everything asked of it. Let the fire's quiet crackle be the last thing. Let the thoughts slow down and soften and stop reaching for the next problem. The potatoes are stored. The bread is set. The milk will be boiled in the morning. You know what you're doing. You've always known. The knowledge is in your hands and in your eyes and in the way you press a loaf in the dark at 5 a.m. without thinking. It lives in your bones. It will live in Ellen's hands. It will live in whoever she tells. Generation to generation, the knowledge of how to feed people, passed from hand to hand in kitchens and market queues and morning conversations at the standpipe. No book, just women talking. Just knowledge, moving. Just the understanding that food requires work and work requires knowing, and knowing gets passed on. That's the whole of it. That's what held the city together. That's what held you together. Centuries will pass. The kitchen where you stand will be gone. The building eventually cleared and rebuilt. The street renamed or rerouted. The market moved indoors and then online. The whole physical architecture of how you spent your days dismantled and replaced with something so different you'd stand in it not knowing what to do. Supermarkets, refrigerators, pasteurization stamps on sealed containers, sell-by dates printed by machines, potatoes washed and bagged and graded and priced before they reach the shelf. No need to press them, no need to check, no need to know. The work your hands knew will have no place in that world, but the need it served, the need to feed people, to stretch what you have, to make something from almost nothing, to make it nourishing and warm and enough, that need won't go anywhere, because people will still need to eat, because families will still need to be fed, because someone will still need to do the arithmetic. The arithmetic will be different, easier mostly, more margin for error, more options at different price points, more information available, more labelling, more accountability from the sellers who spent centuries adulterating everything they could get away with adulterating. But someone will still need to know which potato to choose. Someone will still need to make the soup stretch. Someone will still need to make a decision at the butcher's counter, this cut or that one, this price or the other. The skills will change, the knowledge will change, but the need to know will not. And somewhere, in a kitchen that looks nothing like yours, in a building lit from the inside in ways you can't imagine, a woman will stand at a counter and make a decision about what to feed 5 people on a limited budget, and she'll use knowledge she didn't know she had. Knowledge that came from somewhere. Knowledge her mother mentioned once or her grandmother showed her, or that she worked out herself through trial and the error of a bad meal on a Tuesday. The knowledge passes on. It always passes on. It's passing on right now, even as you sit in this chair by this fire, in this year, in this city, in this room. You are part of it. You were always part of it. Now let the night do what nights are for. Let your hands be still. Let the arithmetic rest. Let everything be quiet. You've earned this quiet. Take it. The fire is low but steady. The room is warm enough. The people you love are breathing around you. That's enough. That is exactly enough. Good night.